Hello and welcome to my lecture on chapter 11 which is on the topic of standardized tests. Okay, so overview, we're going to look at standardized testing skills, types and descriptions of standardized tests used in career counseling, as well as application to the cast of clients from chapter 1. So as we begin, maybe think about, have you already completed a course on assessment for standardized tests in counseling? And if you have, this is going to be kind of like a review, but for anybody that hasn't taken a test on that subject, this is going to be a preview, and you can anticipate learning a lot more about testing in that course, which would be intake and assessments. So 5 testing skills: test identification, test selection, test administration, test scoring, and test interpretation. So table 11.1 is a good resource for you to look at in your book. So for test identification, you want to consult with your colleagues, look through test publisher catalogs or websites, explore test compendia, and visit conference exhibits, as well as use test imprints and other test databases, because that means they're legitimate and they've been tested and normed and validated and made reliable, all those kinds of things. As for test selection, there are 10 steps that you can follow for selecting a standardized test. You want to determine your purpose, number 1. Number 2, identify available tests designed to meet your purpose. Are you looking for anxiety? Are you looking for depression? Are you looking at autism? Are you looking at a self-esteem issue? Are you looking at OCD or dissociation? 3, you want to ensure you're qualified to use that test. So different licenses are allowed to use different testing. 4, ensure that the characteristics of the tests, like the publication date, reading level, language format, are appropriate for the client, right? So you wouldn't want to use an adolescent screening instrument for someone who's 54 with a really high IQ, right? Want to use the adult screener, but likewise, you wouldn't want to use an adult screener for a child. The language might not be where they can understand what's going on, right? So there's a lot of assessments that have like the adolescent version, and a number of them will put an A in front of it. So like the dissociative experiences scale, for example, for adolescents, it's the adolescent dissociative experiences scale, so ADES. You want to ensure that the norming sample is appropriate for your clientele. So like looking at what is the sample size according to the research for that standardized test. Does it fit who you're trying to look at, what the population is? So like if a test has only ever been normed for Caucasian persons, you wouldn't want to use it on someone who's maybe Japanese or Native American, Indian, indigenous, or Black, or any other race besides white, because it doesn't match what it's standardized to. Okay, the race doesn't match what the standardized race is. Okay, so number 6, consider the psychometric properties. So is it reliable? Is it valid? And reliability means, does it effectively measure something from the one person to the next person to the next person to the next person, versus valid, does it measure what it's supposed to measure, right? Number 7, read expert reviews of the test. 8, examine the test materials, right? Look at the manual, the instructions, scoring, interpretation, all these things. 9, consider pragmatic concerns like cost, time, ease of administration, and scoring, availability of interpretive materials. And then 10th step is make your selection. What do you want to use for what you're trying to measure? So test administration requires strict adherence to standardized administration procedures identified in the test manual. So you're supposed to go in the order of the steps that it says. And you can think about the administration instructions for tests you just might have reviewed. So you want to pay attention to, do you go one at a time? Do you take your time? Are there time limits? Are you supposed to say certain words when you ask certain questions? These different kinds of things. As for scoring, various methods of scoring do exist. You can do hand scoring, template scoring, on-site computer scoring, mail-in or web-based computer scoring. And there's an obvious need to ensure that the scoring is done correctly. So even if you are pretty sure you know how to do it, always make sure you review the scoring procedure to make sure that you scored it correctly, because you don't want to score somebody super high on anxiety when maybe their anxiety is low because you misunderstood how to do the scoring, right? Okay, and then test interpretation. You can develop a solid understanding of the results through the interpretation. You want to use common and understandable language and remind your client of the purpose of the test and recommended use of the results. So it's also important to look at any limitations of the test and let the client know those things. Present the results using common, understandable language. So don't use a bunch of counseling, psychology, psychiatry language that a non-mental health professional wouldn't understand. You can also provide a visual aid summarizing the results, like a bar graph, a pie graph, a histogram, other different kinds of things, depending on whatever your testing is. You can invite the client to react to the results and or ask questions, and also discuss possible implications and uses of the results, again, clarifying limitations that do exist, right? So are the results going to be something that lead to a referral for a psychiatrist or a referral to some other kind of doctor or an herbalist, someone that does naturopathic things or what have you, right? So types of standardized tests used in career counseling. So there's tests related to career selection, tests related to career decision-making, and tests related to career adjustment, right? And as you can see here, table 11.1 from the textbook, you've got tests for interest, personality, work-related values, abilities, academic ability, vocational aptitude, decision-making, and career adjustments, right? These are all very powerful things that can be used in the career counseling process, right? Because maybe people come in, I don't know what I like. I don't know what I'm good at. I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what's important to me. I have no idea, right? So all these little tests can be things to help them along in terms of gaining clarity and achieving their career counseling goals. So tests related to career selection. So you've got the interest, personality, values, ability, academic, vocational assessments that you can utilize, and you can see those in the tables in your textbook. For interest assessments, the most common type of standardized test is used. This is the most common type of standardized test used in career counseling is the interest assessment, or that type is the interest assessment. Items may ask clients to report to the therapist, what are their likes, what are their dislikes, what are their preferences. And the items may also ask clients about behaviors and activities, so manifested interest. So maybe they say they like puzzles, but really they only ever go do mini golf, right? Like what are the things that they actually make happen and do? Some of the common interest areas, common interest assessments are self-directed search, strong interest inventory, Campbell interest and skill survey, and the Cooter career interest assessment. Table 11.2 in your book has some other examples, and the text also describes each of those. As for personality assessments, these are used to distinguish between personalities involving normal traits and those that might have pathology. You want to ask clients to identify how well the characteristics describe them as an individual. So it's very much so rooted in self-report that way. Some of the most common personality assessments used in career counseling are the California Psychological Inventory, the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, the NEO Personality Inventory, and 16PF. Table 11.3 in your book has other examples, and the text also has descriptions for each of these. I find that the Myers-Briggs is one that I use quite a bit. I find that it's useful, it's applicable, and something that's interesting that you can examine whether clients have had a change. So maybe if they're in therapy earlier in their life and they come back some years later, it could be different just because life experiences can impact the way that people are introverted, extroverted, etc. As for values assessment, standardized tests in career counseling may also assess work-related values. So do they value a boss that's encouraging? Do they want a healthy career or a healthy work environment? Do they value family-oriented leadership? Do they value time off? All these different kinds of things. It's helping the client to understand the intrinsic and extrinsic rewards that they seek to get from a career, right? Some of the most common ones are the Career Anchor Self-Assessment, Cooter Work Values Assessment, Minnesota Importance Questionnaire, and the O-Net Work Importance Profiler. Table 11.4 has other examples. You can also look at your textbook for descriptions of each of those. In terms of academic ability assessments relevant in career counseling, They are relevant because most jobs require some level of academic proficiency, and some may require higher levels of education for entry into the profession itself. So like lawyers, for example, or being a counselor, right? We're required to have a higher degree. Or a teacher is required to have a bachelor's degree, right? Or to be a master's professor, you're required to have a PhD. So those are some just important things to know about clients to be able to help them figure out, with the career goals that they have, do they need to go back to school? They might need to, or they might not. Some of the most common used assessments are the ACT, Adult Basic Learning Examination, college test, PSAT, SAT, all those, graduate exams, GRE, MCAT, etc., and the Wonderlic assessments. Table 11.5 for other examples. In your book, you can look at table 11.5 and then see the text for descriptions of each of these. One thing I will say about those SAT, ACT, things like that, I think it's important to point out to clients that those tests aren't necessarily indicative of how well you're going to do in college. I'll openly admit, as a PhD student, my ACT and SAT scores would have had you thinking that I wasn't going to do very well in college. When I took the SAT, the highest you could get was a 2400, and then they changed it, and I got a 1600, which was average. And on the ACT, I got a 19. And I laughed because I didn't know that like test prep was a thing. I thought it was just like you show up and take the test. So for me not to get zeros on both of those is pretty cool, I think. But those tests wouldn't tell you that I'd be doing a PhD program right now. So those aren't necessarily indicative of someone's ability to be successful. And I always find that it's useful to tell clients that, maybe you didn't do good on the SAT, ACT, whatever other tests you've had to take to this point, but that doesn't mean you can't be successful in college. Okay, vocational aptitude assessments. So standardized tests that purport to measure aptitudes and skills needed in various work settings, or what those are for. Some can be subjective where it's self-reported, whereas others are objective measures and they're clinician administered. Again, some of the most common aptitude assessments in career counseling: Ability Explorer, the ASVAB, which is something that people take in the military to determine their employment within the military. The Campbell Interest and Skills Survey, ONET again, and then the Valpar Career Ability Test. Your book again has descriptions for each of those, and there's a table for some other examples. As for career decision making, these tests focus on factors affecting one's ease or difficulty with the process of making a career decision. So it's going to look at cognitions, which is their thoughts, their beliefs, the way that they think; self-efficacy, which is their belief about their ability to be effective; their career maturity; and their career readiness, right? What are their decisions going to look like based on these things? They're going to help them with that process. And some of the most common assessments are the Krumboldt's Career Beliefs Inventory, the Career Decision Self-Efficacy Scale, Maturity Inventory by Savickas, and the Thoughts Inventory by CIP. Again, you can look at your text for more information about those. As for career adjustment, these are tests that focus on factors related to career adjustment, like work readiness and employability skills, occupational stress, and job satisfaction. So it's kind of looking at like how we doing with where you got to. How are you doing adjusting to this new career, to this job that you've got, potentially. But it could also be looking at how would you do to adjust to a new career. And some common ones used are the ACT work keys, Adult Career Concerns Inventory, the Brigance Transition Skills Inventory, Occupational Stress Inventory, and Work Skills Inventory. You can see your text for more information about those. And then as an application activity, you can do a self-directed search for yourself, take the test and score it. It's just getting an experience of what it would be like for a client to take that test themselves, to be able to have some empathy. Yeah, I've taken one before and this is what it's like, and da, 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 da. I've seen that clients like to know that their counselor is a human being that has had life experience similar to what they've had, or they've done the same quizzes or whatever, just to kind of normalize it a little bit. So that could be a good activity to do, and you can share your results in the comments below. And then lastly, here's a way that you can apply those different tests that we just went over to the cast of clients if you're interested. just to get an experience of what that would look like for each of them. So you can start to conceptualize, how would I use these tests with an actual client, right? So thank you so much for listening to this lecture, and I'll catch you in the next one. Please leave any questions or comments below in the comment section.